Hey everybody, turns out I have a little more work to do than I originally thought. Did you ever have an experience in school where you get a homework assignment back and there's a big fat red I at the top? I, of course, standing for incomplete. A fate worse than failure, only because not only did you do a bad job, but you have to do it all over again and resubmit. And that's where I stand right now. The powers that be have decreed that my explanation was insufficient. It wasn't good enough to just say I found it in a field. Have to be a little bit more specific in how I found it. So here we are. I guess I have to prove that I didn't just copy somebody else's homework here. Lucky for you guys who are interested in getting into some of the methods of my madness, you might find this interesting. Okay, so let's crack on with it. Let's start with day number 2. You guys know the drill by now. The early ones, early images, you're not looking for anything specific that you're going to use to solve it right off the bat. You're just trying to make some bullet points of some key things that you're looking for, okay? So clearly, the mason jar this time around is hidden within a stump, and we're in a clearing. So one thing I ask here is, what do I think the age of this clearing is? A few clues can help us decide that. If we look at the stumps and the debris, the branches on the ground, you can see they're actually kind of old. These are not clear, freshly cut branches. These are at least a few years old here. On the other hand, we look at this clearing. We don't see any small trees, no saplings, a lot of brush, a lot of grasses. This indicates to me that the clearing is not that old, because if it were older than, say, 4 or 5 years, we would have a lot more small tree growth in this. So my estimate here, based on this image, is that this clearing is somewhere between maybe 2 and 4 years old. Okay, and that's going to be important later on down the line when we try to solve it. Okay. Jump ahead a couple of days here. Let's go to day number 5. And this is about the point I said, aha, okay, we're starting to get some data here that I can actually use to make a more effective search. We get a better sense of what the clearing looks like. You can see the back edge of it here. And I don't know what the clearing is, but I have to try to figure out what kind of a clearing I'm looking for on the satellite images. Now, west to east, I don't really have a sense of what this could be, how long it is. But north to south, and we do know this is north because the sun shadow is north to south this time of year, I can get a sense of how long this is, how long this clearing is, based on the shadows of these trees, okay? And these shadows are clearly white pine trees because you can see the canopy of pine needles up at the top and then the trunks that run down below. These are mature pines because the more mature a pine gets, the higher up the canopy of pine needles goes. So if I know that the high pine trees are behind me somewhere, and those would represent the back edge of this clearing area, I might be able to deduce the size of the clearing based on the length of these shadows, okay? So a quick Google image search tells me that this time of year, there's a 26 degree angle of the sun to the horizon during the midday hours. And this does look like a roughly midday-ish kind of sun for November. The shadows aren't too stretched out. We know that, later in the day or in the early morning, there's really long, dark shadows, okay? So this is probably midday sun. So if we use our old good friend, the Pythagorean theorem, plug in that 23-degree angle into the equation, and we make the assumption that a mature pine tree is roughly 50, 70 feet tall or so, then we get a solution that tells us that the length of the shadow is likely probably right around 100 feet or so, okay? And since the shadow goes back into the woods a little ways, I'm guessing that maybe the edge of this is probably like 80 feet across from the base of these pine trees over to here. So I know north-south axis, I'm looking for a roughly 80-foot clearing or so, okay? I don't know what this clearing is. I can make some assumptions. We know it's not a trail. Trails aren't 80 feet wide. It's not a road. There's nothing to indicate that anybody has driven over this. Could be power lines. That's a possibility. But I didn't think Jason was crazy enough to fly a drone up near high-tension wires. That's just asking for trouble, obviously. So I can kind of rule that out. And my conclusion is that it's just a clearing area. If we assume this is on public land, which it almost certainly is, then this is probably just a patch of forest that was cleared out for ecological purposes to sort of promote biodiversity. This is a very common thing that forest rangers will do, especially in wildlife management areas where they want to establish new areas for things like deer and such to be able to forage. Okay, and this is very common in the management areas, not so much in the state forest, and definitely not in private trust land. Okay, so when I sort of came to that conclusion that there's a pretty good chance that this is a WMA versus a state forest or somebody's private trust land, you can kind of eliminate a lot of areas. I can't for sure say this isn't on a trust land or in a state forest, but I think, based on what I'm seeing here, is that it's more likely to be in a WMA. Okay, so this is a cool website, this DNCR State Lands Viewer. It tells you, what types of public land you're looking for. So the red in this case is state land, the green is public trust land, and then the yellow is the WMA. So right now I'm thinking, I bet there's a decent chance it's in one of these WMAs, and it turns out there's not that many of them. So my search is narrowed quite a bit if I make that assumption, okay? Not quite there yet. I can't quite definitively say if it is or not, but I'm starting to lean that way. All right, so let's jump ahead. The next day, this is kind of a weird image because for those of you that have been playing along, you'll know that the canopy reveal usually takes a lot longer than this. It's almost like we missed a couple of images in here, but for whatever reason, we jumped from up really high suddenly. But I see this photo and I say, okay, there's everything here that I need to solve the puzzle. Okay, couple of things that you'll notice right off the bat. First, the drone is using a wide-angle lens. How do you know that? Well, look at all the trees over here on the bottom left. They're angled this way. The trunks of the trees on the bottom right are angled this way. So you know there's some distortion going on with the lens, with the lensing in the corners, right? Okay. So you may have been making the assumption that this is sort of a rounded field. Maybe it's a round field I'm looking for. But no, because once you factor in the fact that it's a wide-angle lens, you know that this is likely a straight edge to the clearing, okay? And we know that the north-south axis is probably going to be about 80 feet wide or so. Again, we're not sure how long it runs, but what I'm looking for is that roughly 80-foot wide clearing next to a forest of a good mix of conifers and deciduous trees. You can see probably a roughly even mix. So that's a good clue right there as well. But the ultimate clue here, and you can see this, is the river in the top. You see the dark, sort of smooth areas here. There's two things it could be. It could be a river, it could be a road. You can eliminate a road right off the bat because that would have had to been new wet pavement in order to show up that dark, and that's clearly not going to happen. So what can the river tell us? Well, it's not a huge river, but it's big enough that you can see it at this distance, and it's winding. You can see it probably comes down like this and through here, and then it snakes up in here. So you have a winding, snaking river. And another key feature of this river is that it has very distinct banks. A lot of rivers in this part of New Hampshire have a lot of like sort of marshy swamplands to them, and you have very indistinct banks. But in this case, we have a very sharp bank, and then the trees are right up to the edge of the river. Okay, you see this maple or whatever it is here, right to the edge of the river. So now I'm looking for a snaking river that has trees right to the edge of it. Okay, and that's sort of where my head is at this point. Now, if we come back into Google Earth, this is, of course, what we need to use to solve this. And what we're going to do here is try to find a similar river. Okay, we'll start out with the Lamprey River here. This was sort of my initial thought. Go right to this one. But you can see there's a bunch of problems with this. First of all, let's go back in time to the winter, 2018, last winter image. And that gives us a much better sense of the river's edge and the terrain here because we get rid of all the leaves on the trees. Now, we're looking at the right forest here. This is a good mix of conifers and deciduous trees. But the problem is several here. First, the river doesn't match what we're looking for. We're looking for something very snaking. This snakes, but it's very long, gradual snakes, and then it has long, flat stretches. This isn't exactly what we're looking for. Second, it's near populated areas. We can't have that. Third, it runs north to south. And remember, we're looking for a river that runs east to west because in our image, we're looking to the north or some function of north, northwest, northeast, but the river likely runs west to east. So we know it's not this section here. What about down here? Okay, this looks a little bit better. It's a little bit snaky, the right kind of trees. But what you also see here is marshland, okay? And we know that there's no marshland involved in this. The banks are not distinct enough. So right now I can pretty much eliminate the Lamprey River, all right? But remember, my thought was that it might be in a WMA, and you come down here and say, oh, this is an interesting WMA, the Piscassic River WMA. And we come down to this river, and okay, now we're talking. It runs west to east, check. It's a good mixture of deciduous and conifers, check. Got a distinct bank, and it's winding, okay? And you're coming along here saying, okay, this looks really good. It's snaking just like in that image, just like what we would expect. So now let's look for a clearing that might be near it, okay? Come over here. Okay, this clearing looks good. You know, you're looking north, but you can easily rule this out because remember I said the clearing is about 80 feet deep or so, and this clearing is obviously way more than 80 feet. This is hundreds of feet wide. So this is, you can obviously rule this one out right away. This one here looks a little bit better, but the ground doesn't look quite right here. I don't see any debris on the ground. And I say, well, if this, if this field would have been clear cut, surely you would see a lot of limbs and tree trunks on the ground, and you don't see any of that. And then it dawns on me, hey, wait a minute. The age of this clearing is probably, remember the assumption I made is probably about 2 to 4 years old. And the image we're looking at here is from 2018. So in likelihood, the clearing I'm looking for is not on this map. And it was at that point I said, okay, that is the trick. That's the secret. So really, this is a great looking river, but I don't see any clearing areas that match the description. So what I have to do is jump forward in time, find a clearing that was on a more recent satellite image that's not on this 2018 image. So look what happens when I fast forward to a more recent one. Boom, here we go. And that's exactly where it is. So this clearing, which fits our description perfectly, it's got a nice flat straight line to the northern flank of it. It's roughly about 80 feet wide or so, and it's adjacent to this river, this snaking river, which is actually exactly the kind of snaking that we were looking for. So as soon as I saw that, it's it. It could have been, one of several of these cleared out areas in this WMA. There's a whole bunch, but obviously this is the one that makes the most sense. These here are looking south toward the river, so that wouldn't be it. And these are too far away from the river down in here. So this is clearly the winner. So that was it, and it was actually a pretty easy hike. Here's the rail trail here, and then there's a little pathway that comes off of it, bridge that goes over the river. It was a quick hike through the woods to collect the treasure. So that's it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this little tutorial, got some insight into my warped brain here, and maybe I'll get a better grade on this homework assignment than I did on the last one. But until next time, guys, adios.